2021 looks to be the year of time loop games. Ironic given that most of us have been living the same day over and over again for the past 18 months. Deathloop and 12 Minutes have been on my radar for years now, but there's a good chance it will actually be the Forgotten City that wins my inaugural Time Loop Game of the Year award. It's a spectacular game that wonderfully utilises the time loop mechanic to tell the story of a small group of strangers trapped in the titular Forgotten City. Now, I can't talk about the Forgotten City without mentioning the Outer Wilds, so let's get it out of the way early doors. The Forgotten City does indeed have a lot in common with my 2019 Game of the Year. Both are puzzle games centred around a time loop where you replay the same events again and again, building on knowledge from previous runs until you figure out what the hell is going on. And to cut to the chase, the Forgotten City is not quite as good as the Outer Wilds. Very few games are. The Forgotten City is a little rougher around the edges for one thing, and it lacks the magic that the Outer Wilds had with its twin planets and black holes. Where the Outer Wilds focused on cool mechanics, the Forgotten City focuses on characters and dialogue, and as such the experience is more grounded, both literally and figuratively. However, the Forgotten City is still a great game, and I highly recommend you play it, especially if you like the Outer Wilds. Both games are best experienced with as little foreknowledge as possible, so there won't be any major spoilers in this video. In fact, I'm going to do what I did in my Outer Wilds video and keep the first half incredibly light on detail, and then give a spoiler warning, after which I will give minor spoilers to illustrate how things work in the game, in case you want more detail. Personally, I think you're safe to watch the entire video, but frankly I can't tell what a spoiler is anymore. To many people it seems to be any information I don't already know, which I think is a little silly, but whatever. If the Forgotten City sounds familiar, that might be because it was initially released as a Skyrim mod in 2015. The mod has over 3 million downloads and was the first to win the National Writers Guild Award in Australia. Sole developer Nick Pearce started work on the mod back in 2012 when he still worked full-time as a lawyer in regulatory strategy and needed a creative outlet. I did a tiny bit of regulatory work when I was a lawyer, and let me tell you, meaningful progress in that field is so slow it makes game development look relatively speedy by comparison. I can't blame him for wanting out. Pearce decided to make a mod after being impressed by those in Fallout New Vegas, but he picked Skyrim simply because it was the big new moddable game of the time. Although given how often it's re-released, I suppose it's always the big new moddable game. Pearce had no development experience and learned on the job. He started off by building dwarven ruins before deciding to add the people who used to live there, and eventually he came up with the time loop concept. He even added voice acting and a score. So yeah, it turns out there is a good story in Skyrim after all, you just have to mod it in. Following the success of the mod, Pearce decided to go legit, so to speak, and started developing the Forgotten City as a separate standalone game. Separating from Skyrim was both a blessing and a curse. On the one hand, Pearce now had full creative freedom to tell whatever story he wanted. On the other, he could no longer use the Creation Engine and had to make the switch to Unreal Engine. He hired a full-time programmer and artist, plus a bunch of contractors. He even consulted with PhDs to ensure historical accuracy. 6 years after releasing the initial mod, the Forgotten City released as a standalone game to fantastic reviews and seemingly strong sales. I can't be sure, and this is incredibly anecdotal, but it doesn't feel like the Forgotten City has had that breakout indie moment that some games get where everyone is raving about it, which is a shame because it does deserve mainstream success. You start the Forgotten City exploring an old ruin and are quickly whisked through a portal and sent nearly 2,000 years into the past, which means the ruin is now a small city. The city and its 20 or so inhabitants are mainly Roman, but there's Egyptian and Greek influences here too, and a pesky new group of rebels known as Christians are beginning to make their voices heard. For one brief moment, the city looks idyllic. The populace seems to get along and they've set up a small market where they trade clothing and necessities. There are golden statues dotted around, impressive temples dominate the skyline, and there are no weapons. And then you find out about the Golden Rule.
The many shall suffer for the sins of the one.
The Forgotten City is cursed. If one person commits a sin, the entire city is wiped out. This collective punishment is modelled after the policy of decimation used by some Roman militaries, where every 10th man was put to death as punishment for crimes such as desertion. Variations on this practice have been used all the way up to the early 20th century though, so it wasn't exclusively a Roman thing. The Golden Rule also brings to mind the Greek and maybe Roman myth of Baucis and Philemon, in which Zeus and Hades visited a town as mortals and asked for hospitality. They were rejected everywhere they went, even by people of means, until eventually they stumbled upon a poor couple who offered to help even though they barely had enough to feed themselves. The gods wiped out the entire town as revenge for their lack of hospitality, but did give the poor couple a heads up so they could escape to safety. The Golden Rule opens up a few ethical quandaries, some more clear-cut than others. Collective punishment is obviously bad. If the pandemic has proved anything, it's that there are a lot of stupid people out there, and I don't want my life to be dependent on the sensible decisions of humanity as a whole. The more interesting debate that the game dives into centres around what is right and what is wrong, and who decides. For example, whoever came up with the Golden Rule apparently doesn't think indentured servitude is a sin. Our enlightened modern day character can point out how absurd this is and take the moral high ground a bit. However, we are later forced to admit that even 2,000 years in the future, many people still spend their lives doing things they hate because they've been lumbered with a ridiculous amount of debt at a young age. Now obviously indentured servitude and student loans are not the same, but I appreciate how the game didn't just let our character act all superior and pretend that the modern day world has solved all of humanity's problems. I must admit the ethical discussions aren't especially deep or novel, it's kind of ethics and philosophy 101. The game won't change anyone's worldview, but I found the conversations interesting even though they do sometimes delve into levels of whataboutery that feel more like Twitter replies than Socratic debates with the world's greatest minds.
If there is one thing I have observed about rules, it is that virtuous people do not need them, and evil people will always find a way around them.
Beyond ethics, the Golden Rule is a prominent and useful gameplay mechanic. You can and should break the Golden Rule yourself sometimes. This awakens the golden statues who start killing everyone and forces the city's leader to create a portal which you can then use to loop back to the beginning again. You keep any items you have on you, plus your newfound knowledge of the people and the city. You then use this to make changes to how events play out next time. There are many mysteries to solve, big and small. First of all, you might want to escape and get back to the present day. There's a woman who has been abducted, which is two mysteries in one. Where is she, and why did her abduction not break the Golden Rule? There's a big election coming up and you can influence the outcome, and nearly every character needs your help with something. It took me about 7 hours to get the canon ending and complete all the side missions. Unlike the Outer Wilds, you're not really on a timer in the Forgotten City, so if you found that part of the game a bit stressful, then know that this is a more relaxing experience. Events tend to be triggered by you walking up to them instead of by timers and countdowns. Similarly, while you can use weapons, you don't have to, and even if you do, the combat is very basic stuff. Overall, the Forgotten City is definitely easier than the Outer Wilds. There aren't any weirdly tricky bits of terrifying fish this time. I found the ending incredibly uplifting, and I would say that on balance this is a feel-good game, albeit one with dark events happening within them, including suicide. As you might expect from a game made by such a small team, there are some niggles, but nothing that should stop you from playing. If you're interested in checking it out, then this is the time to stop the video. If you need more convincing and don't mind a few light spoilers from the opening hour, then keep watching. The brilliance of the Forgotten City doesn't shine through until you really see it in practice, so with that in mind, let's look at some early examples. Technically, the game is non-linear, but there are certain things that most people will likely do early on, so I consider those things to be mild spoilers. The first thing I did was stumble across a woman dying from poison. A trader nearby has the cure and is demanding an extortionate amount of money for it. He's price gouging for life-saving medicine, which, while morally bankrupt, doesn't appear to be a sin according to the Golden Rule, although you can certainly debate whether it should be. You can't afford the medicine at the start, although there is money to be found if you explore. The medicine is casually lying out in the open where anyone can just take it, except they can't of course because that would break the Golden Rule and everyone would die. So I took it and broke the Golden Rule and everyone died. The statues came to life and killed everyone except me because I made it back to the portal. Time then rewinds and you're thrown back to the start. Everyone else has forgotten who you are. You then go to the doctor, medicine in hand, and save the poisoned woman's life. The trader is completely oblivious. As far as he's concerned, his medicine is still there outside his shop. Another example is a man trapped in indentured servitude and threatening to kill himself. There isn't much you can do to stop him the first time you meet him, and as dark as it sounds, you don't really want to for reasons that I won't spoil. Anyway, you can pay off his debt and free him from servitude, which stops him taking his life. You don't even need to find all the money in one go. Just get as much money as you can, break the Golden Rule, rewind time, and then grab the same money again. Repeat until you have enough. There are other ways of solving this problem that I won't spoil. The real star of the show, however, is Galerius. Galerius is awesome because he stops you having to redo things you've already done. Galerius is the first person you meet when you leave the portal, and you can get him to complete things you did in previous loops. So taking the previous two situations as examples, you can give Galerius some of the medicine and tell him to give it to the doctor to save the woman's life, and then give him the money to get the guy out of servitude. That way they both live and you can go about your business as normal while he's running around doing chores for you. This whole system even ties into the story later in a wonderful way. The Forgotten City doesn't weigh you down with needless conversations. When you talk to someone you met in a previous loop, there's always an option to basically say something like, hey, you won't get this, but we've had this conversation before, so let's skip ahead. And the NPC is like, cool, okay, and you move on. Most missions are solved through conversations. The Forgotten City is all about acquiring knowledge and using that knowledge to get what you want. That said, there is a weapon that lets you move through infested areas with enemies and even aids in exploration. The combat is incredibly simplistic, and I don't really mean that in a negative way. The basic bow and arrow combat is really only there to mix things up a bit and provide an excuse for a story around the tortured creatures that you're killing. It is interesting that even though the Forgotten City is a standalone game now, distinct from Skyrim, you still end up playing as a stealthy archer. The game forewarns you about sections that are combat heavy and makes it clear you don't have to do them. I recommend you do though, because the Forgotten City is one of those games where you want to experience the entire story. Some of the quests are linked in ways that feel a little contrived, such as having important quest items locked in a jail cell, which practically forces you to do a bunch of other stuff first. And I'm pretty sure you have to complete nearly all of the quests to get the canon ending, although the way in which you're forced to do that I think is actually quite clever. I liked it. Completing the quests gets you closer to the characters. They're a great bunch. Each one has a story about how they arrived in the Forgotten City, and they'll happily tell you what they think of the Golden Rule or the Big Election. Most of them are just straight up nice people, and few are beyond redemption. There is some minority representation, including a mentally disabled character who is handled sympathetically. Nothing groundbreaking to be clear, but I appreciated having a mentally disabled character who wasn't there to be evil or the butt of jokes. I'm not doing ending spoilers obviously, so I'll keep things very vague here. Basically, everything ties up wonderfully in the canon ending, and the epilogue gave me the warm and fuzzies. There are a few twists and turns along the way, but they all make complete sense, and more switched on players than myself will actually figure out what's going on before the game spells it out for them. While the game touts 4 endings, it should be noted that 1 is basically a fail state in my opinion, and endings 2 and 3 are very similar. There is a clear canon ending you should be working towards. I do have a couple of issues to complain about, but before I do I just want to reiterate how small the dev team was and the lead developer's lack of experience. Given all that, it's actually incredible the problems are so relatively insignificant. I suppose the main issue is that when conversations are your main mode of gameplay, it can be frustrating when you can't say what you think you should be able to say. It's the equivalent of having lots of invisible walls in an otherwise open game. There were a few times when my character refused to follow fairly obvious lines of questioning. For the most part I could live with it, but there was an egregious example when it caused me a real problem, which I will talk about vaguely to avoid spoilers. I wanted to accuse someone of something. See? Very vague. Anyway, I could accuse them, but I didn't have enough proof, and the conversation ended with me promising to get evidence. So I got the evidence, and yet the conversation went the same way, with no way for me to bring in that new evidence I'd found. I assumed there must be more, so I kept looking but couldn't find any. I needed the proof to blackmail this person to do a thing. I eventually decided, well, to hell with it, and I tried to blackmail them again, but I expected to fail for lack of proof. However, in this different conversation branch, when I was asked for the proof, I was able to bring in my evidence and successfully blackmail the person. And now, okay, that probably made no sense without the specifics, but trust me, it was weird and annoying. Dialogue can get a bit messed up while the events are playing out, as if the game hasn't quite caught up with who is alive or dead. And I had a conversation with a woman who said she was going to go hide in her bakery while she was already hiding in her bakery. There's also some topical dialogue, including meme references, which I fear will age about as well as console shooters before the invention of dual analog sticks. Movement and exploration is a little awkward, especially jumping and moving around objects. Thing is, you don't really need to do anything even remotely fancy, but I didn't know that at first. Some quests hint at hidden entrances, so I figured a bit of exploration was required, and I tried jumping places the game clearly didn't want me to go. Credit where it's due though, there's a great automatic follow feature where you can press a button and have the character automatically follow an NPC. This needs to be more common. On a more minor note, character animations are awkward and you have to watch them turn around slowly every time you speak to them. Finally, and almost insignificantly, the lighting is oversaturated in a way I don't love. It makes the game look cheaper and older than it is. I don't especially care, but it's something that could be improved. Niggles aside, The Forgotten City is an awesome game and well worth your time. Sure, you can tell it was made by a small team at times, but that just makes it feel like a labour of love. As far as I can tell, The Forgotten City was successful, but it also seems to have passed a lot of people by and deserves to make more of an impact on the industry. It's almost like The Outer Wilds became the time loop indie game and people don't have room for another. Personally, I'm happy to play loads more time loop games of this quality, especially given how cookie cutter the AAA industry is right now. So yeah, The Forgotten City is not the once-in-a-generation experience that The Outer Wilds was. However, it is still damn good and I highly recommend you play it. Alright, that's it for this video. Bit of a short one, but after playing The Forgotten City, I knew I had to talk about it. I considered a full-on spoiler critique video, but I really want you all to play this one for yourself if you can. If you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't already. I have a Patreon if you'd like to support me and get your name in the credits for $1 a month. YouTube has been miserable for views and ads lately, so I cannot emphasize enough how much that Patreon support helps. I wouldn't get half as many videos out if it weren't for that financial support I receive there. Okay, until next time. Cheers.